Those of you that know me, I'm LaShawn Gordon. I get the privilege of being the Director of Membership and Engagement for United Partners of Human Services. If I haven't worked with you yet, I'm pretty sure we'll be having a knee-to-knee soon, because that's one of the things that I love. Also on the phone is my colleague and our Executive Director, Amber Tynan. And we are so excited that Mickey Moore, the Mickey Moore, is joining us today to present this training. So Mickey is the principal and consultant for More Business Strategies. He's been in this game for well over 20 years. So he's kind of one of those nonprofit superheroes. And he specializes in board development, fundraising, management, and leadership. And so when we started talking about this training, we thought it was very, very fitting for us to do, as we're all kind of pivoting and making tough decisions as we're navigating this pandemic. So we're going to have a super light interactive training today. If you have a question, please put it in the chat, and I am okay with interrupting Mickey to answer those questions at any time. So I'm going to let Mickey take it over and tell you a little bit more about himself, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Mickey, take it away.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Thank you, UPHS, for the opportunity to share more information and insights. And let's make this as interactive as we can. But thank you all for dedicating some time this morning. I admire LaShawn's interest in getting started, because she told me we only had 3 hours. So we want to go ahead and get started. Just kidding, but I see the faces. We're not going to be here 3 hours. We're going to get through it. Yeah, so I've been in Tallahassee. I think I moved back in 1995, and from there I began a career in finance, and then also nonprofit world. So about 15 years in finance and about 10 years in the nonprofit world, mostly around business development, sales, fundraising, team building. So I'm happy to be able to share a little bit about that today. And personally, I'm a big fan of my wife and 2 boys, and living in this community and giving back to this community is important, which is an example today of sharing a lot of these successes and failures and gathering through my experience and expertise in these fields and sharing that with you. These things today that we're going to talk about are much more practical, less theoretical, because I like to share what I've learned from mistakes over the years, but in working with teams that have had some success to relative degrees. So I wanted we'll go ahead and look at this first slide. I want to lay some foundational stuff. You're going to touch on today, certainly hear the words teamwork, inspiration, sharing, success, trust, and support. And when it comes to a partnership, it is that. It is an exchange. And I would like you all today just to foundationally keep a few things in mind. First of all, whether you're a board member or a staff person, clear your mind today and be open to these suggestions. But also understand that the success in executing some of these things is all relative to your organization and your specific situation. Some of you may have 1 staff, some of you may have 10 staff, some of you may have 5 board members or 40 board members. So just keep that in mind as to what you take from today and execute at your organizations. As I mentioned before, a lot of these were gathered over the years of listening and learning and trying and succeeding and failing. But most importantly, on the partnership realm, look within first when you leave today, and look within first to think about what you could do differently or better to help your partner succeed. So if you're a staff person, what could you do better? What could you do different to help your board member be more successful in fundraising? And then on the other side, as a board member, what could you be doing different and better to help your staff be more successful in fundraising? I think if you come at it through that lens, you may be easier to identify ways for us to be more successful. So essentials today, big picture, and we're going to drill down near the end to some very specific examples that a lot of my clients are using now to increase the success of partnerships between staff and board. All right, so let's get going. Again, thank you very much for being here this morning. So, LaShawn, go ahead and let's move the next slide, and we'll kick things off. So, challenges. We've got 35 to 40 folks that are with us this morning, but I wanted to take briefly just 3 minutes, maybe, if anybody of the 35, just so we can hear from you. Share quickly who you are and what organization, but what is a current challenge that you, your board, your staff, your organization is having when it comes to specifically board and staff partnerships in fundraising? We just want to generate some conversation just to see if perhaps what we talk about later today, later this morning, will address any of them. So just raise your hand, and LaShawn will find you, or you can throw it in the chat real quick. Anybody want to offer? And I know a lot of you, so I can call you out too, because I see your names. Yeah.
So if you are open to answering this question, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. I see Ms. Kathleen has put in the chat box, challenge with engaging the full board to raise funds in support of the organization.
Let's go, and thank you, Kathleen. The board. Okay, raising funds. Good. Thank you, Kathleen, for that. Anybody else want to add any other challenge outside of raising the funds?
Vicki, it's Terry Sue at WAVE. I would echo the same thing. That's what I was getting ready to say, is as an executive director trying to motivate, serve and lead the same group of people. That's what's so tricky about being the ED, is to get them excited and willing to raise money and to fundraise for the organization. But also, I think as a staff person, feeling supported by your board, not just in words, but by action across the board in a very general sense, but specific to fundraising.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Terry Sue. Appreciate you sharing that. And there's a couple other comments. Justin Barfield. Look, I just lost the comment on. And we got quite a few. That's good. Thank you. In the cultural shift, including transitions of key positions and how that can impact success in fundraising partnerships. Thank you, Justin.
And we have Trisetta Alexander, who just started a nonprofit, and she's saying, hey, I'm new, I don't know where to get started. And then we have Jenny Daly with Faith Presbyterian Preschool, and she's talking about most of the events have been large gatherings in person, and we all know that can be a challenge. So they can't do those this year. So they have to make a shift. And then also the challenge to make sure volunteers carry more of the kids than staff.
Nice. Okay. Thank you. No, that's some good input to certainly get us started, from cultural shifts to having a new organization. How do we get the volunteers to carry more of the weight? Staff feeling supported by the board in that, but then also staff having to lead and serve at the same time, ultimately to raise money for the organization. So thank you for sharing those challenges, and continue to type them in, because after this, I'd be happy to get a list of those challenges from LaShawn and maybe offer some insight to those that submit them. So, all right. So the next slide, let's jump into this. The first area I wanted to start is just a peek at the nonprofit industry. And some of you have mentioned, I think Jenny just mentioned COVID, and its impact. So when you look around today, and potentially the impact tomorrow on our industry because of some of these things, but we all know that giving did increase. Of course, 2020, we'll see what happens there. The COVID-19 disruption on a lot of different things. It's nice to see that donors are still giving. I think Alice Lee did a recent poll in a Building Better Boards that showed even those on that event that day said they would still give, or potentially give more during this time. So, but it's still disruptive to a lot of things, especially the next one, the special events. We all are aware that our community, there's a lot of special events. So what are we doing differently? grants and government revenue. I put that up there just because of today and tomorrow, our local governments, their revenue might be hurting. A lot of foundations, their revenue might be suffering. So that long-term impact of COVID on grants and government revenue. The election and economy, not that y'all never heard anything about that in our community here in Tallahassee, but it can certainly have an impact. And then the last two, where are we with diverse revenue streams? That's a topic that everybody's talking about now. And even in a document that I wrote back in March and shared, how important it is to have diverse revenue streams at nonprofits. Because when one suffers because of something like a pandemic, natural disaster, do you have other spokes on your fundraising wheel that you can turn to for revenue, which leads into sustainability eventually, and getting our relationships changing from transactional in the nonprofit industry to more of a relational gift and relationship, if you will. So I'm sure that you've seen these before, but I just wanted to put them in front of you today because the things we're sharing will impact some of these. Thank you, LaShawn. All right. So deliver consistent, the first essential. And those that know me, you won't be surprised to read some of these things, because before we ever try to execute things, we've got to deliver consistent messaging and provide clear direction. So it starts at the top. And I think, Terry Sue, this is to your point. It has to be a joint effort between the chair and the executive director. Chair of the board and the executive director have to be on the same page, playing from the same sheet of music, however, whatever cliche you want to use. But it is just very important that they show this elbow to elbow, supporting each other back and forth. And this is a staff and a board relationship. It shouldn't be, in the best case scenario, staff always trying to push the narrative. It should be a narrative that is pushed and supported by the executive director and the chair at the same time. People want to know where they're going and why they're doing things. So it starts at the top. Near the bottom, influencing behavior through changes in structure and process. That's what we're attempting to do. I use a lot of sports analogies, but I think a lot of us can look at our favorite, for me, favorite maybe football player that throws too many interceptions, and instead of yelling and telling them to stop throwing so many, we talk about their footwork and their release point. And that goes to changing behaviors through structure and process. If we'd like our staff and board to be a better partnership, but we've got to put some things structurally and procedurally in place to get that to happen. Because yelling about it won't change anything. So we've got to put some things in place, ultimately to create a culture of philanthropy, which isn't easy to do and takes a lot of time. But through consistent messaging and clear direction, your organization can understand the importance of philanthropy, from your maintenance employees to your CEO, executive director, all the board members, all the volunteers. They understand the importance of development, and it permeates the organization, and how everyone can contribute to developing that culture. So consistent messaging and clear direction is the first essential. Okay.
Mickey, if I can ask a question. So I know you have right up there where it starts at the top, and I'm a believer of what's in the head flows down into the body. Can you touch on a little bit, just kind of about with modeling? So if you're at the top of an organization, if something isn't a priority for you, it's not necessarily going to be a priority for the team. So if you can just kind of unpack that a little bit more, because we are working with a lot of newer executive directors right now.
Sure. Thank you. Great question. And it's, one of those things, by leading by example, really, right? If an executive director shows each day that they're behind fundraising, that they understand the nomenclature, they understand the goals, and they're pushing it, well, then staff's going to believe in that. And the leader, I think leadership in any organization has the responsibility to motivate the team and to provide direction and where we're going, but doing it by example. The whole do as I say, not as I do thing. No, I mean, you've got to live it, breathe it as a leader if you want others to do the same. So if the board chair, right, is not behind fundraising, is not supporting it, talking about it, mentioning donors, mentioning the special event, other board members are less likely to as well, right? Ultimately, accountability comes into play, but that's another conversation. But yes, the ED's got to be the cheerleader around fundraising and engaged. And again, it's relative, LaShawn, as I said, to the organization, right? If there's an ED and there's a director of development, that's a different dynamic than the ED being the director of development at the organization. So you get into different structures there. Super important. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So the second essential, clarifying roles and expectations. You know, when it comes to raising money for the organization, when it comes to even cultural shifts in the roles of volunteers and board members, you got to clarify the roles and expectations. And in my work with our clients now and others, and even the boards I serve on, these are the items that typically come up, whether they be currently at the organization or not. You got to move towards some of these things and establishing these things. So for example, your bylaws and job descriptions for employees, bylaws typically will detail the expectations of board service. If they're not descriptive and detailed as to the fundraising role, they need to be. They have to be in there. This is the start of the conversation. You can't hold folks accountable for any kind of performance if you don't clarify the expectation up front. The next, board matrix and position narrative, you know, having an extra document for your board members to read during the recruitment stage before they ever join the board that says, hey, these are the things we expect you to do as far as fundraising and participation. But then having a board matrix available all day, every day, so you recruit to the gaps on your board. And that can impact the success of your fundraising partnership as well. If you've got 10 board members and 8 of them are within the same industry, your reach then is somewhat limited when it comes to finding new donors or getting new influence. So keep a board matrix. It's a spreadsheet, you know, with the demographics of your board. Giving, you know, again, this is a topic we could, you know, spend a long time talking about. I know my peers in the industry, a lot of folks that y'all know, Kelly, Alice Lee, and others, we talk about how important it is that the board gives. And should you define an amount that they give every year? I am a fan of coming up with a number that they give, a cash gift each year. But the start is having the expectations. There are still boards out there today that don't have an expectation for board service and giving, and you should. But then staff too. Do your staff give to the organization? Now you have to walk and tread lightly here because, you know, ED, for example, when I was at Southern Scholarship Foundation, I had one conversation a year with our staff, individually, privately, about the importance of supporting our organization. And that was it, because I didn't want to get into any potential coercion or any of those things. But it's important that leading by example, board members giving, staff giving. Okay. Survey evaluations, put this tool in there. If you're not sure how the partnership's working, ask, right? So are you evaluating the board? Is the board evaluating itself? Are you evaluating your fundraisers on a regular basis? Is it clear what you expect of them? And are you gauging their evaluation, their performance? And then asking how you can help them do better. Proactive cultivation and stewardship, that's a process of itself, but clarifying the individual roles for your staff and your board, how they can participate in cultivation and stewardship of donors. And I'll show you some examples of that later on. And lastly, strategic plan. You got to have some goals, objectives, strategies, and then a budget to support these fundraising expectations, right? So is it your goal this year to increase your revenue by 10%, or your pledge society grow it by $100,000, or to get 100 new donors? Having some measurables and expectations and goals and objectives is important and essential for a successful partnership. Otherwise, what are we trying to accomplish? Other than meeting the narrative that you gave to the board member or the staff person, give folks numbers to shoot for. Make them challenging, but let's have some goals and objectives and strategies to accomplish together. Okay.
And Mickey, before we move to the next slide, we do have a couple questions in the chat box. Jenny just wanted to put out there, if you could provide a template of a board demographics matrix, that would be amazing. And if you have one, we can send that out to all of the participants on this call. And then Trisetta wanted to know, is there a range for what board members usually contribute?
Yeah, it's a good question, you know, and a lot of it's considered on the, if you look at your donor database, you look at the revenue of the organization, but I've seen some that have done $50 all the way up to 5,000. And really, it just, again, depends on the revenue and the size of the organization. And then the board, what dollar amount they're comfortable with. And I would suggest that you take baby steps there, right? If you've never had a financial requirement to serve on your board, I wouldn't jump out to the $5,000 one, right? Just consider the revenue, your average gift, look at your donor database. Who are your key donors? What's the average gift of your key donors? And then start from there. Okay. So the next essential is periodic training and education, keeping in mind that we're all busy here. Right? Volunteers have their own jobs, right? They have their other commitments. They're here to give freely of their time and energy. We got to keep that in mind. And how many of our board members, upon joining the board, are professional fundraisers, right? They have their own jobs. You know, they've gone to school to be an attorney or a CPA or whatever, work in the restaurant. Very few of them come to us properly trained or professionally trained in fundraising. So we've got to do a good job as nonprofit staff of providing some training and education for our board members and our staff. So these are some highlights there that I'm working with my clients. Conversationally competent. Again, those of you that have worked with me before, you've heard me use that phrase quite often. Every board member, every staff member should be comfortable in discussing the mission, vision, and case for support for the organization. Being able to express to people what we do, and then also where their investment goes and why their investment, why their participation is important. Relationship building philosophy, I trademarked something called connectivity and participation. You and your organization could come up with something else, but it helps rally the troops around the messaging, again, in direction when you're out there communicating with donors and prospects. How does your organization go about building relationships? The next step is having a development plan and a gift acceptance policy. How familiar are your board members and your staff with your entire development plan? If you have one, and if you don't have one, you know, talk to somebody about eventually developing one. Diverse revenue streams, sustainability, development plan will help you get there. But your board, okay, how comfortable, how competent are they in conversation about your development plan, your gift acceptance policy? Fundraising 101 sessions, I think we started these back when I was at Southern Scholarship Foundation, but at least once a year, if not more, hosting these fundraising sessions for staff and board. Nowadays, you might be able to do more of them with Zoom, but again, it's keeping it in front of them. If you expect to develop a culture of philanthropy, you've got to keep the nomenclature, you've got to keep the development plan, you got to keep these things in front of your board members to continue the training. And I'd be silly if I didn't at least reference UPHS in this presentation. So the continuing education in our community is huge, and how awesome it is. There's always a workshop going on for board members and staff to improve their ability to fundraise. And then lastly, the development committee would play a very important role. Having a standing committee. Again, I understand some boards don't have standing committees, some do. I would encourage you to have a standing committee that meets on a regular basis to discuss results, activities, measurables, gifts received, all of those items. It's essential for that partnership that the board members understand the success that you're having or the challenges you're having as an organization when it comes to development. So that's periodic training. Okay. So the more essentials, these are specific examples, and I want to elaborate a little on a few of these depending on the time, and of course maybe answer some more questions at the end. So if you've got some questions, keep typing them in the chat for LaShawn, and we'll go over and answer as many as time will allow today. So the first thing under more essentials, keeping in mind the items we just went over, is to create lists for retention, expansion, and acquisition influence, okay? So in your nonprofits today, some of you may have a CRM or a database that you're using to manage your donor relationships. Some of you may not. Whatever you have, use it to your best ability, and take that system and build some list tomorrow. And the list you should be building are for those 4 reasons. So retention, create a list of your current donors or past donors in the last 12 months and divvy them up and segment them by the amount of gift, right? So segment your donors and build them on list. So you'll title them based on how much they've given. The idea here is you'll eventually share the list. And when it comes to fundraising, we're all out there for retention, for expansion, acquisition, and influence. Your board members can provide great influence in the community in helping you build these relationships. But we've got to give them more information than expect them to come up with it on their own. So create your donor list, your prospect list, and your centers of influence list, and share the list. So one example I'll give you, as I told you, I was in the banking world a few years ago, and we had great line of business partners, is what we called them. So I was in consumer banking most of my career. Then we had business bankers, and then we had investment bankers, and we had mortgage bankers, right? So you get the picture. We were charged every month with providing a certain number of referrals to all of our line of business partners. But then what would come back to us would be a short list of some of their current customers that they felt would benefit from meeting with us. So we were encouraged to always share our list with our line of business partners. So I have transitioned that, of course, into fundraising to where if you have a list of prospects, you have a list of key donors, you have a list of centers of influence, share those short lists with your board members. So at a development committee, if you have a short prospect list of 5 to 10 donors that you'd like to meet with, periodically share it with your board members in confidence. Ask them if they know anybody on the list to help you get your foot in the side door versus the front door with everybody else. Cold calling is a no-go when it comes to prospecting. So that's one way to do it, is to utilize your centers of influence, your board members, to help you get more appointments, more meetings, hopefully more gifts. So consistently sharing your list with your board members and your centers of influence. Participation form and the referral form, I'll tackle these kind of together. But the participation form, so much of what somebody mentioned earlier, how do we get volunteers to do a little more? So connectivity, participation, one of the things we had created back at Southern Scholarship Foundation was a participation form we would give to our board members once a year. And it was separated into 2 categories. One would be a listing of financial opportunities to support, and the other would be a listing of volunteer opportunities for them to engage in. And we would ask them to check off which ones in the next 12 months they would like to participate in. So we would list specifically from a financial perspective, would you like to sponsor a student? Would you like to sponsor a house? Would you like to sponsor an event? Would you like to? So any financial opportunity we would list, and then on the bottom we would list, would you like to speak at a speaking engagement? Would you like to attend a dinner at one of our scholarship homes? Would you like to engage our donors? Would you like to be a volunteer at a special event? So the participation form was just, it's a real document in front of them every year that they would have to fill out and commit to. and then turn that into staff, and then we would have to follow up. So Barbie Morrow at the time was our student affairs director. She did a wonderful job with that. Every time that a board member would say they want to participate, she would have a process in place to follow up and to engage them. At the end of the day, that's what we want our board members to do, is to participate as much as they can. And it's not always about the financial piece. So a participation form, it's black and white, it's on a document, they sign it, they commit to it, create a process, structure and process to influence their behavior. So a participation form, I encourage you to consider creating that for your board. Think about those events and those financial ways, and think about the volunteer opportunities that they can participate in, and ask them to commit to it. The next one was a referral form. So this goes back to my line of business partner days, where for our clients, we've created a referral form that gives board members options every year and how they want to participate in providing referrals. This again would be an annual document at our annual meeting, a referral form, participation form, confidentiality form. All of those governance documents would be re-signed along with these once a year. So on the referral form, again, a lot of detail here from a practical standpoint. There were 3 options we would give board members. The first option would be to provide up to 3 names, address, email of someone that they know that they can introduce us to who might have an interest in our mission. Okay, so the first option is they will provide names for us to engage. Second option would be us sending them names. So they would check the box that says, please send me one of your list to see if I know anyone, which is awesome, because then you control the quality of that lead, right? Because it's on your defined list of key donors or prospects. So then you would follow up and share the list with the board member and go from there. And the third option, if they didn't like the first 2, they would volunteer to host a meet and greet at their business or at their home for potential donors or current donors. So I've got the referrals. Please give me names for a referral, or I will host a meet and greet. So again, it's another way for your board members on paper to commit to being engaged in the stewardship, cultivation, fundraising process via a referral form. The next one, scripting for email or phone. We create these scripts now for our clients, to where, board members, again, how many of them come to us professionally trained in fundraising? Very few have. So we've created scripts that we would give to board members that they can copy and paste, put into an email to help get more appointments for your director of development or your executive director. They're guides, and the main piece is around the value proposition or the case for support in the scripting. It's not a script that says, hi, how are you? Can you please send us some money? That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about relationship building script. So those can be super helpful for your board members. It lowers the angst of having them ask for money and feel like that's what they've got to do. It's not about them picking up the phone and asking donors for money. It's about using their influence to help you make more connections and to get people to participate. That's a total different sentence than, hey, board members, call these people on this list and ask them for money. That's not what we're asking. That's not what I would suggest you ask them to do, okay? Let them help you get in front of more people. Joint efforts, speaking engagements, visits, and meetings. So again, staff and board members working together, Rotary, Kiwanis, go to these places, do speaking engagements, give testimonials, let them meet with donors with you, do it together, use their influence. They're participating in fundraising by being in the room. Participating in fundraising as a board member doesn't mean they actually raise the money for you. They influence the ability of the money to come in. Pulse checks. This was awesome. This is an easy way for board members to engage. Again, this is just an outreach to a key donor, current donor, just to say thank you, how are you, we appreciate you, any questions about your giving. We call those pulse checks. It's not an official donor meeting, but it's a consistent part of your outreach and it's done by a volunteer. As a donor myself, when I've gotten a call from a board member of an organization, I've noted that. That's a little different than a staff person who is supposed to be calling me. So it's an added incentive for me to continue participating in your organization. But it's a simple way for them, a very practical way for your board members to engage in the process. And then one of the last ones, thank you cards or handwritten notes. Recognition is important for all concerned when it comes to relationship building. But I know when I worked with Amber, we did this on a regular basis. Amber was always on it with cards going around the table at the development committee meeting or board meeting, where board members would handwrite notes to our key donors, and then we would mail them out. So again, just small, simple ways for your board members to engage and increase the success of your fundraising partnership. So there are some more practical, smaller ways that you can structure process, influence behavior through structure and process changes, putting it in front of them, and as staff, us being more proactive and more educational toward our board members to get them to participate in more varying ways for success. So thank you, LaShawn. I promised, like I said, I went through that pretty quick. I told you we'd be out of here by noon. But I think we certainly have a few minutes to take some questions if you think there's a couple out there we might want to answer.
Absolutely. So we have a couple different questions. First of all, I think we're going to do some gathering of resources, and we'll make sure that we get that out to everyone. There was a couple questions about what does that script look like? Of course, the board demographic matrix. And so we want to make sure that we are providing our members with the tools necessary. Terry Sue had a question, and Amber gave her some information, but it was just ideas for organizations who don't have a CRM, some of the things that, especially newer NPOs, some of the things that they can do to pull together that information when they really don't have a budget for it.
Thank you. Thanks, Amber. Yeah. Oh, you said she answered. Yeah, again, there are many options out there for CRMs, and bit wide range. Some are a little more amenable to the budget and some are pretty expensive. But whatever you do have, there is a way to manage that information to your advantage, right? Even if it's a spreadsheet, you can still filter that spreadsheet and download and export it to build some lists to work from. And the reasons you want to work from lists, I don't know about you, but time and energy is probably the most limited resource we have, right? So when you as staff or board are going to turn to do fundraising, work from list. Know who you're going to call and why, and who you're going to reach out to and why. Build those lists, because not everybody is a qualifiable lead. So you've got to go through that exercise too, because your time is valuable. Okay. What else?
My good friend Lou made a great point that he'd like for you to expand upon a little bit, but he said the need for financial transparency within your nonprofit organization, and I think that is super important. If it's a rough time, I think the board need to know that. The board, if it's good, the board need to know that as well. So thank you, Lou, for mentioning that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, transparency and bringing everybody into the conversation, where appropriate, I think is important. Your development committee, your finance committee, your board, where's the budget? What are the goals? Are we getting there? And it's okay to admit when you're not, or when you're exceeding or you're not exceeding. At the end of the day, for me, it comes to activities, and board members and staff having those difficult conversations around activities and expectations and holding people accountable. It may say a $0 budget, right? Hey, we hope to have a balanced budget at the end of the year, but your aim should be to have a margin, right, at the end of the year. But how many calls, how many visits, how many engagements, establishing the expectations and utilizing some accountability along with transparency, it is what it is. Yeah. Good point, Lou. Thank you.
And Jason had a great question as well. Thank you, Jason, for that. So he's wanting to know, can you define the difference of giving out your own pocket and peer-to-peer fundraising activities?
Yeah, so as far, and where's Jason? I don't see his picture. I haven't seen Jason in a while. It's good to see my old AFP board member. There he is. Yeah, I mean, so you've got giving out of your own, right? And whatever your commensurate to your budget. And there's in-kind giving. There are a lot of different ways that you can support the organization through your business or personally. And it's up to the organization to define what that board giving is. But peer-to-peer, again, the participation forum, I think that we've created, listed some opportunities there. And I'll even backtrack a little more, Jason, because you and I worked together a lot on AFP, and there was no staff on that board, right? So we had to do everything. And even now, you're a volunteer, you have a job. How much time and energy can you spend in peer-to-peer and tracking it all and making those connections? So the words I use, connectivity and participation, and I mean that 100%, is that whatever time and energy you can engage your network, I would track as a board member through the meet and greets. That was one of my favorite things to manage and to offer for our board members. You talk about peer-to-peer. It reminds me of the old, what is it, Tupperware stuff and other, you come over to people's houses and, you do the Tupperware stuff or the cleaning supplies from years ago, but not that hard of a sell, right? So I think the peer-to-peer piece, the influence piece of board members helping staff get their foot in the side door versus the front door is a huge part of it. I hope that answers some of what you're talking about, Jason, as far as, quantifying.
Yeah, I was wondering if you had some like, definitions or, specific activities that you could, provide to board members in terms of thanking people, and defining what that means to promote and be an ambassador for your organization in terms of board roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, and again, a lot of that's going to be in your position narrative. Number one, it should start there, and or your bylaws, right? But no, all the examples you just used, right? But being conversationally competent first, though, Jason, right, is trusting in the board members that they have the ability and they can, through education, practice, to communicate those things on behalf of the organization. That's the first step. How many board members that are on now can recite the mission of the organization that they're volunteering with, or the case for support? So I am a big believer in utilizing them for the outreach and the influence that they have, but making sure they're educated in the messaging, right, and the direction. So we're all speaking the same language around the mission and the vision. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, good work, man. Good to see you, Jason.
You too, Mickey.
So do we have so feel free to unmute yourselves if you need to, but do we have any other questions?
Hey, Mickey. Lou Wilson here. We had our board when I started in November. We went out to our board, and in addition to the foundation mission statement, we had our board create their own mission statement, and we got them involved by designing it and approving it for the percentage of how they would participate through outreach, fundraising, and governance. And it seemed to get them all involved and excited again about being part of the organizations. And they created their own mission statement, which was really worked out well.
Great. Yeah, I'm a believer in creating buy-in and allowing input, and that's one way you do it. If you let them be a part of the decision-making process, the more likely they are to execute it together, right, and be excited about it. So that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that, Lou. I'm looking, Justin, you typed in something. I'm trying to find an example of best practice. Go ahead.
Yeah, the person above me just mentioned transparency on the website. I was just wondering if anybody had an example of that they could point me to for design purposes.
Okay.
I can answer that. On our website, help helpflvets.org. That's helpflvets, VETS.org, O-R-G. And
Thank you, Lou.
if you go to About FVF on that website, you'll scroll down and see an entire list of our board officers and our board and our district directors. And it says financials right there. And it clicks to our own financial page. And we have our
Awesome.
annual reports, our 990s, our determination letter, all there on one single page for transparency. And what that has helped our board do is when they refer people to our website, they refer them directly to that page. See what we're doing. See how we're, what we're trying to accomplish. And it's with our audits and our FDVA statutory oversight, it's all right there in front of their face, so they don't have to look in a different place. And it really helps to support them in what they're doing and how they're fundraising.
Thank you so much, sir.
But
And Jenny just asked about some, fundraising methods that are out there outside of special events. And of course, I'm a fan, Jenny, of having a development plan with a lot of spokes on the wheel, right? So different lanes of revenue generation, different lanes of proactive activities. So one of the spokes, of course, is special events. And because of COVID and other things, we've all had to pivot. And I know a lot of the folks here joining us today, they've gone to virtual events, right? Online events, and that's certainly an option. I would encourage you, Jenny, to have a conversation with somebody around developing multiple spokes on that fundraising wheel. For example, you've got annual appeals, you've got special events, you've got grants, you've got cultivation and stewardship from individual donors, you've got pledge societies, legacy societies, planned giving societies, endowments. There are, again, a lot of different spokes, and depending on where your organization is with its donor database, how many of those spokes that you can build structure and process around. The diversity is the key, and then sustainability. So, and of course, Jenny, I'd be happy to talk to you about that on the phone and bend your ear for a few minutes if you'd like. Good question.
Do we have any other questions? So I'm going to go ahead and put Mickey's contact information up on the screen. And if you have any additional questions for him, he will be happy to have some conversation with you. Also here at UPHS, please know that we're always a resource for you. And so if it's something that you need between Amber and myself, we will definitely make sure that we get it for you so that you have it as we're all pivoting and navigating these crazy times right now. So with that being said, we don't want to hold you for the sake of holding you. We're going to go ahead and close out our training today. So thank you for joining us. We all hope you all enjoy the rest of your week. Be well, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.